He asked it in the kitchen. He thought I was asleep upstairs. He used the voice a 50-year-old man uses when he has been carrying a question for a long time and finally lets it out, late at night, to the only person in the room. He did not know I had come down for a glass of water. He did not know I had stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He did not know. The kitchen vent above the stove carried his voice through the wall and into the small hallway where I stood, in my bathrobe, with my hand on the banister. For the full 90 seconds, it took him to finish his sentence. By the next Friday, I had answered him not with tears, not with shouting, not by walking into the kitchen to confront him. I had answered him with 3 pieces of paperwork signed at my own dining room table by a lawyer my husband had been waiting to send me for 7 years. Here is what actually happened. My name is Joan. I am 73 years old. My husband Frank died in 2017. We had been married for 46 years. He had been a small-town pharmacist for 38 of those years. He had owned a corner drugstore on Main Street in our small Indiana town from 1979 until he sold the business in 2014. He had retired with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. He had not, however, lived to spend it. He had been diagnosed with esophageal cancer in March of 2017. He had died in August. He had left me a paid-off 3-bedroom house on a quiet street, a small but solid investment portfolio that paid me about $4,200 a month in interest and dividends, and a small life insurance policy that had paid out in October of 2017 $300,000, which I had deposited into a savings account at our local credit union, and which had been sitting, mostly untouched, for 7 years. The $300,000 had been the part of Frank's estate that my son Mark had been most aware of. I had not yet, in November of 2024, understood how aware. I would understand it on a Tuesday evening in early November. My son Mark is 50. He is married to a woman named Rebecca. They have 2 children, my granddaughter Madison, 16, and my grandson Tyler, 13. In April of 2023, Mark and Rebecca had moved into my house. The reason had been a flood. Their house, a 2-story colonial in the next town over, had had a burst pipe in the 2nd-floor bathroom on a Sunday morning in March of 2023. The water had run for about 6 hours before anyone noticed. The damage had been substantial. Their homeowner's insurance had eventually paid for most of the repairs, but the repairs had taken much longer than anyone had expected, and Mark had called me on the Monday morning after the flood to ask whether he and Rebecca and the kids could stay with me for a few months. I had said yes. That had been 20 months ago. The repairs to their house had been finished in October of 2023. They had not moved out. By November of 2023, Mark had told me they had decided to rent their house out for a year to cover the gap in their savings. By March of 2024, the rental had been extended because the tenants are great and the income is nice. By the autumn of 2024, the topic of moving back to their own house had stopped coming up at all. They had taken the upstairs of my house. Mark had moved his home office into Frank's old study. Rebecca had repainted the family room in the summer of 2024 to brighten it up. The grandchildren had taken what had been my guest room and my sewing room. I had moved, temporarily, into the small 1st-floor bedroom that had been Frank's recovery room during his final illness. I had been in that small bedroom for 20 months. I had not yet, in early November of 2024, said anything to Mark about how long the few months had become. I had been planning to. I had been working up to it. I had been telling myself I would bring it up after Thanksgiving, when the family was relaxed. The conversation in the kitchen happened the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. It happened, in a way, because I had walked downstairs at the wrong moment for a glass of water. It also happened, in a deeper way, because I had been walking downstairs in my own house for 20 months and had not yet noticed how often I had been holding my breath while I walked. It was 11:17 p.m. on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I had been in bed since 10. I had not been able to sleep. The heater in the small first-floor bedroom had been making the dry, rattling sound it had been making for 3 weeks, and I had been meaning to call someone to fix it. And I had also been meaning to ask Mark about it, because he kept saying he would take a look, and he had not yet taken a look. At 11:15, I had decided I was thirsty. I had put on my bathrobe. I had walked out of the small bedroom. I had walked down the hall toward the kitchen. The hallway between the small bedroom and the kitchen passes by a small ventilation grate above the stove on the kitchen side, which connects to a corresponding grate in the hallway ceiling. Frank had installed both grates in 1989, when we added the back addition to the house. The grates had been intended for circulation. They had also, by accident of construction, carried sound between the two rooms with remarkable clarity, which Frank and I had learned in 1989 when we were trying to keep secret the small surprise birthday party we were planning for our son's 10th birthday, and which Mark, aged 10, had overheard through the grate from the hallway one Saturday afternoon. I had not thought about the grates in many years. I was about to think about them again. I stopped in the hallway just before the kitchen entrance because I heard voices. Mark's voice, Rebecca's voice. They were sitting at the kitchen table. They had thought I was asleep. I want to tell you what I heard. I want to tell you exactly. I have written it down since that night, in my own handwriting, on a piece of paper that is now folded inside a leather portfolio in my lawyer's safe. The wording is the wording. I have not adjusted it. Mark was talking. He was halfway through a sentence. He said, "And I know it's terrible to say, Becca, but honestly, sometimes I just wonder. I mean, what is she still doing here? She's 73. She's healthy. She could live another 15 years. 15 more years of us in this house, of her in that little room, of the money just sitting there in the credit union. Why is she still alive? Like, that sounds awful. I know it sounds awful, but what is she still doing here?" Rebecca's voice, quieter, careful. "Mark. Becca. I love her. I love my mother. You know I do. But it's been 20 months, and she's not going anywhere. The 300,000 from Dad's life insurance, that money was supposed to come to us eventually. I have been counting on it for our retirement since 2017. Tyler needs braces. Madison wants out of state for college. We are going to have to take out loans. And the money is just sitting there, in a credit union, earning whatever a credit union pays, probably less than inflation. While she lives in her little room and watches her shows and has no idea that she is the only thing standing between us and getting out from under the rental." Silence for a moment. Then Rebecca. "Mark, stop, you don't mean it." Mark. "I do mean it, Becca. I do. Some part of me means it, and the other part of me hates myself for meaning it. But Becca, I look at her sometimes and I think, Mom, when? When are you going? When are you giving us the chance to actually start our lives? I have been waiting for this money for 7 years. 7 years. And now she's living in our way of getting to it. I love her. I love her. But also when?" He stopped. Rebecca said something I could not make out. Her voice had dropped lower. I did not stay to hear it. I walked, very quietly, back down the hallway. I went back into the small bedroom. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed. I did not get the glass of water. I did not turn on the light. I sat in the dark in my bathrobe for a long time. I want to tell you that I cried. I did not cry. I sat in the dark, and I listened to the heater rattling, and I thought about the words, "What is she still doing here, and why is she still alive?" And I thought about the small bedroom I had been sleeping in for 20 months, and I thought about the $300,000 in the credit union, and I thought about Frank, who had died in August of 2017, alone in a hospital bed at 3 a.m., with my hand in his, having told me at 6 p.m. the night before, in the last fully coherent sentence he ever said to me, "Joni, take care of yourself. I will not be there to do it for you." I thought about that sentence for a long time. Then I got up. I walked, very quietly, to the small desk in the corner of the room where I kept my checkbook and the small notebook I had been using since 2018 to write down household expenses. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. I wrote down, in my own handwriting, the words Mark had used. I wrote them down word for word. I have always had a good memory for things that hurt me. I wrote them down because I had decided, in the 90 seconds I had spent in the hallway, that I was going to need them documented. I wrote until 12:15 a.m. Then I closed the notebook. I went to bed. I did not sleep. I lay in the small bedroom in my husband's recovery bed, in the house I had bought with him in 1973, with my son sleeping upstairs in the bedroom that had been mine for 44 years, and I waited for morning. At 6:30 a.m., the time at which Mark normally left for work, I heard the front door close. At 6:45, I heard Rebecca leave to take the kids to school. At 6:50, I got up. I went into the kitchen. I made myself a cup of coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where Mark had asked, 7 hours earlier, why I was still alive, and I drank the coffee. I made it through one full cup. Then I picked up the phone. I called my lawyer. I want to pause here and ask you something honestly. If you had overheard your only son in your own kitchen at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday before Thanksgiving, ask his wife why you were still alive, and follow it up by explaining that he had been counting on your husband's life insurance money for 7 years, and that you were standing in his way of accessing it. What would you have done in the next 12 hours? I think a lot of mothers would have walked into the kitchen the next morning and confronted him. I think some would have packed a bag and gone to a hotel that night. I think a brave handful would have called every other family member in their address book and read the words aloud over the phone. I did none of those 3 things. I want to tell you why. I want to tell you because I have been thinking about it for the 14 months since that night, and I have understood something about the kind of woman my husband Frank had been preparing me to be without me knowing it. Frank had been a pharmacist for 38 years. A pharmacist is a person who knows that the right response to almost any situation depends on 3 things: the substance involved, the dose, and the timing. The substance Mark had been speaking with was his own ugly truth. The truth he had been carrying for 7 years and had finally, in the dark of an empty kitchen at 11:17 p.m., said out loud. The dose had been small, 90 seconds of speech, 6 or 7 sentences, not enough to fully diagnose, but enough to identify the underlying chemistry. The timing was the question. If I confronted Mark the next morning at the kitchen table, he would deny he had said it. He would tell me I had misheard. He would tell me I was confused, that the great must have distorted his words, that he loved me and would never say such a thing. He would say all of this with the careful tone of a 50-year-old man who knew that his mother, in her 70s, could be made to doubt her own hearing if pressed hard enough by someone she had loved for 50 years. I would lose the argument. I would lose it because Mark would deny it, and Rebecca would back him up, and I would have no witnesses other than the kitchen vent and the small notebook on my desk. The argument was not what I wanted. The argument would not produce the change I needed. What I needed was paperwork. What I needed was a lawyer who already had instructions from Frank about what to do on the day this kind of conversation finally happened. What I needed was to wait until the right time to deliver the paperwork. I called my lawyer at 6:55 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Her name was Helen Albright. She had drafted my will after Frank died. She was about to deliver, on Frank's behalf, a folder of documents she had been waiting to deliver since November of 2017. 7 years, and 1 week before the morning, I called her. Helen picked up at her office at 7:03. She normally arrived before 7. I knew this because Frank had once told me, years earlier, that Helen Albright is at her desk by 6:45 every morning except Christmas. Joni. If you ever need her, she will be there. She answered, Helen Albright. I said, Helen, It is Joan Westover. I am calling about something I overheard last night. She said, Joan, tell me. I told her. I told her what I had heard. The kitchen vent, the 11:17 p.m., the 90 seconds, the exact words. I read them to her, slowly, from the notebook I had written in at 12:15 a.m. When I had finished, Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, Joan, Frank left me a folder in November of 2017, 3 months after he died. The folder has been on my desk for 7 years and 1 week. It was waiting for you to call about this specific kind of conversation. I am going to come to your house tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with a notary. I am going to ask you to do something that is going to feel like a lot to do in a short amount of time. I want you to be ready to do it. I said, Helen, I am ready. She said, Joan, one question. Mark and Rebecca and the children, they are still in your house? I said, they are. She said, Joan, are you safe? I said, Helen, Mark is not violent. He has never raised a hand to me. He is selfish. He is greedy. He is many things, but he is not dangerous in that way. She said, Joan, I am going to ask you to do one more thing today. I want you to drive to your sister Eleanor's house tonight and spend the night there. I do not want you to be in the house with Mark tonight. I want you to be at Eleanor's. Tell Mark you are spending the night with Eleanor because she is feeling lonely. Whatever you tell him is fine. I want you out of that house by 7 p.m., and I want you back in your house at 9 a.m. tomorrow when I arrive with the notary. Can you do that? I said, Helen, I can do that. She said, Joan, one last thing. I want you to bring the notebook tomorrow, the one you wrote in last night. Bring it with you. Do not show it to anyone. Bring it to me directly. I said, Helen, I will bring it. We hung up. I called my sister Eleanor at 7:30. I told her I needed to spend the night at her house. I did not tell her why on the phone. Eleanor was 70. She knew, from the tone of my voice, not to ask. She said, Joni, come over after dinner. I will make up the guest room. I packed a small overnight bag at 3 p.m. I wrote a note to Mark at 5 p.m. The note said, Sweetheart going to spend the night at Eleanor's. She is feeling a little blue and asked me to come over. We'll be back tomorrow morning around 9. Mom. I left the note on the kitchen counter. I drove to Eleanor's at 6:45. She made me dinner. We ate at her small kitchen table. I told her, slowly, over the meal, what I had overheard. Eleanor cried. I did not, she said, very quietly. Joni, what are you going to do? I said, Eleanor, Frank left me instructions. Helen Albright is bringing them tomorrow morning at 9. Eleanor said, Frank. I said, Frank. She said, he knew. I said, he worried, Eleanor. He didn't know. He worried. Eleanor wiped her eyes. She said, Joni, Frank was the best man I ever knew, after my own husband. I said, Eleanor, I know. We went to bed at 11. I slept, finally, the way a woman sleeps when she has, after 20 months of holding her breath in her own house, exhaled. Helen Albright arrived at my house at 8:56 a.m. on Thursday morning. She brought a leather portfolio. She brought a notary in her car. She brought, in a sealed cream envelope inside the portfolio, a letter Frank had written to me in May of 2017, 3 months before he died, during the period when he had still been strong enough to write. She handed me the letter first. I broke the seal. I read, Joni, if you are reading this, our son has finally said something out loud that he has been thinking quietly for years. I am sorry, I am not there to help you with it. I have been watching Mark since he was 30. He is now 38 as I write this. For 8 years I have been watching him, very slowly, become a man who measures other people by what they have, that he might one day inherit. I do not think he is a bad man. I think he is a man who, in his 30s, made some financial decisions that he is going to spend the rest of his life trying to recover from, and who has been telling himself, since his early 40s, that what he is owed by his parents will be the thing that finally lets him recover. Joni. He is going to be okay financially. He has a good job. Rebecca has a good job. They will make it through their bad decisions. They will not need our money to do it. They have been telling themselves for years that they will. That is a story they have been telling themselves. It is not the truth. The truth is that our money is ours. It was my money, earned by me at the drugstore for 38 years. It is now your money, because I am dead, and we were married for 46 years, and that is how money works. It is not Mark's money. It is not Rebecca's money. It is not the grandchildren's money in any direct sense. It is yours. Joni, I have been watching Mark, and I have been worried. I have not said anything to you, because I did not want to be the father who criticized his son to his wife. I have written this instead. I have signed documents with Helen. The documents are sitting in her safe, waiting for the day you need them. They will not need anything from you until that day. On the day you call her, the documents will be ready. The documents do 3 things. First, the house. The house gets moved into a trust. The grandchildren, Madison and Tyler, are the beneficiaries. They will inherit the house at age 25 each, in trust, with Helen's firm as trustee. The trust skips Mark and Rebecca. They are not in the trust. They will not be in the trust. The house will go to the grandchildren when they are old enough to understand what they have been given and why. Second, the investment portfolio. The portfolio stays in your name. You keep all of it. You do not give it to Mark in your lifetime. You do not give it to Mark in your will. The portfolio passes, on your death, into the same trust as the house. Same beneficiaries. Same structure. Third, the $300,000 from the life insurance. Joni, this is the one I want to talk to you about most carefully. The $300,000 is the money Mark has been waiting for. He does not know. I know he has been waiting for it. I have known since approximately 2015. I want you to take that money out of the credit union where it has been sitting since 2017 and use it for yourself. All of it. Travel. A new car. A small condo near the beach. A donation in my name to a cause you care about. I do not care what you spend it on. I care that you spend it on yourself, while you are still alive to enjoy it. Spend it slowly across the next 15 or 20 years. Do not save it. Do not preserve it. For Mark, he does not need it. You do. Fourth, and this is one final thing. Mark needs to leave your house. The arrangement that began as a few months has not been a few months for a long time. Helen has, in the folder, a written 30-day notice for you to give to Mark and Rebecca. The notice is pre-drafted. It is legally precise. It does not require you to make a scene. It simply requires you to hand the document to Mark with a clear date of effect and let the law do the rest of the work. Mark and Rebecca will be out of your house within 30 days of you signing the notice. Joni, I love you. I am sorry I am not there. Take the house back. Take the portfolio. Take the $300,000 and spend it on yourself. Tell Mark, when the time comes, that his father knew what he had been thinking and that his father had loved him anyway, but had loved his wife more. Frank. I read the letter twice. I did not cry. I set it down on the kitchen table. I looked at Helen. I said, Helen, he knew. She said, he worried, Joan. He didn't know. He worried. I said, Helen, let us begin. We worked at my dining room table for 3 hours. I signed the trust restructuring. The house went into the trust with Madison and Tyler as the beneficiaries. I signed the portfolio assignment. The portfolio stayed in my name, with the trust as the eventual beneficiary on my death. I signed the certified mail notice to vacate. Mark and Rebecca had 30 days from the date of service to leave the house. I signed the activation of the $300,000. The money would be transferred that afternoon from the credit union into a new account in my name only, with no beneficiary other than the trust on my death. The notary stamped each document. By noon on Thursday, the house was in trust for the grandchildren. The portfolio was protected. The 300,000 was mine alone. The 30-day notice was being prepared for certified mail delivery on Friday morning. I had not yet told Mark. I would tell him on Friday afternoon, after the certified mail had been delivered. I would tell him, when I told him, the words his father had given me to use. The certified letter was delivered to my house on Friday afternoon at 1:42 p.m. Mark was at work, Rebecca was at the gym, the children were at school. The mail carrier handed the certified envelope to me. I signed for it. I brought it inside. I set it on the kitchen counter. Mark came home at 5:42. He saw the envelope. He picked it up. He read it. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. He looked up. He said, "Mum, what is this?" I said, "Sweetheart, sit down." He sat at the table across from me. I said, "Sweetheart, I want to tell you what I did this week. I want to tell you in the order it happened. I will not raise my voice. I will not cry. I will simply tell you. Are you ready?" He nodded. I said, "On Tuesday night at 11:17 p.m., I came downstairs to get a glass of water. I stopped in the hallway by the kitchen vent. I overheard a conversation you were having with Rebecca at the kitchen table. You said the following things. I picked up the notebook I had brought to the kitchen table with me. I read his words to him. I read them slowly. I read them in his own voice, as best I could remember it. I read for 90 seconds. When I had finished, I closed the notebook. I looked at my son. He was the color of wet paper. He said, Mom, I did not say that. I mean, I might have said something, but you misheard I said, Mark, sweetheart, I did not misheard. I wrote it down at 12:15 a.m. in the small bedroom downstairs. I have read it back to you in your own words. Do not insult me by telling me I misheard. He stopped. He put his face in his hands. I said, Sweetheart, I have not finished. I want you to listen to what I did next. I told him about the phone call to Helen at 7:03 Wednesday morning, about the folder Frank had left her in November of 2017, about Eleanor's guest room Wednesday night, about Helen's arrival Thursday morning, about the trust, about the grandchildren as the beneficiaries, about the portfolio, about the 300,000, about the 30-day notice. I told him about Frank's letter from May of 2017. I told him the words Frank had asked me to say to him on this day. Your father knew what you had been thinking. Your father loved you anyway, but he loved your mother more. Mark was crying now. I let him cry. After a while, he said, Mom, I am so sorry. I am so sorry, Mom. I cannot believe I said that. I love you. I have always loved you. I said, Sweetheart, I know you love me. I also know that you have been carrying for 7 years the belief that the 300,000 in the credit union would eventually become yours. You have been carrying it for so long that some part of you began to resent the woman whose continued breathing was preventing it from happening. The resentment is the chemistry that came out of your mouth in the kitchen on Tuesday night. I am not going to pretend it didn't. I am also not going to pretend that I can continue to live in a house with a man who, however briefly, asked his wife why his mother was still alive. He nodded. He said, Mom, the kids did not. I said, the kids did not. The kids did not hear. The kids are not part of this. The kids will continue to be my grandchildren. They will inherit this house in trust on my death. They will be welcome at this house every other Saturday afternoon. I will pick them up. You and Rebecca will not be in the house when they visit. The arrangement is between me and the grandchildren. They will visit me until I die. They will come to my funeral. They will inherit the house. He nodded. He said, "Mom, what about? What about Rebecca and me?" I said, "Sweetheart, the 30 days begin today. You and Rebecca and the children need to be out of the house by December 23rd. I will be hosting Christmas at my house this year, alone, by myself. You and Rebecca and the children will spend Christmas at your own house, which has been rented for 14 months and which you will need to give your tenants 30 days' notice to vacate, the way they will have just received. The math works out almost exactly. The tenants will leave the day before you arrive. You will sleep in your own house on Christmas Eve." He said, "Mom, I said, "Sweetheart, after Christmas, you and I will have lunch on the first Saturday of every month at my house, alone, without Rebecca, for 2 years. After 2 years, we will see whether we have anything to talk about that is not about money. The first lunch is the first Saturday of January." He nodded. He said, "Mom, I love you." I said, "I love you too, sweetheart." He stood up. He hugged me. He held on for a long time. He went upstairs to tell Rebecca. Rebecca came downstairs at 6:23 p.m. She walked into the kitchen. She was crying. I had not seen her cry in 20 months. She said, "Joan, I am so sorry. I should have stopped him. I should have stopped him at the table. I knew what he was saying was wrong. I knew it." I said, "Mark, stop, you don't mean it." And he kept going, and I let him keep going. I should have walked out. I should have come and woken you up. I should have. I said, "Rebecca, sit down." She sat across from me. I said, "Rebecca, you are a good person who has been married for 12 years to a man who has been quietly resentful of his parents' money for at least 7 of them. You have known. You have not stopped him. You have hoped he would grow out of it. He has not. You have, slowly, started to believe some of what he believes. You did not believe it strongly. But you believed it enough that on Tuesday night, when he said the worst sentence I have ever heard a man say about his mother, you said, 'Mark, stop. You don't mean it.' But you did not say, 'Mark, what is wrong with you?' The difference matters. The first one was loving. The second one would have been honest. I am not blaming you. I am simply telling you that I noticed." She nodded. She said, "Joan, I have heard everything. I am so sorry, Joan. I do not know what to do. I do not know how to fix this." I said, "Rebecca, you are 46 years old. You are a smart woman. You have a successful career. You are going to spend the next 2 or 3 months thinking very carefully about what kind of marriage you want for the rest of your life. I am not going to tell you what to decide. I am simply going to tell you that the question is now in front of you, and that it has been in front of you for several years, and that you have been avoiding it. The avoidance is over." She nodded. She said, "Joan, I am sorry." I said, "Rebecca, pack carefully. Take what is yours, leave what is mine. There is a small piece of jewelry I gave you for Mother's Day in 2014, a small gold pin with a freshwater pearl. That is yours. It was my mother's, and I gave it to you, and it is yours. Take it with you." She nodded. She said, "Joan, thank you." She went upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after they had both gone upstairs. I did not cry. I made myself a second cup of tea. I thought about Frank. Mark, Rebecca, Madison, and Tyler moved out 23 days later, 1 week early. They moved into their own house, which their tenants had vacated the day before. The grandchildren came to my house for the first scheduled Saturday visit on January 11th. Mark dropped them off. He did not come inside. He kissed both children on the head at the front porch and drove away. Madison and Tyler came inside. I made them grilled cheese sandwiches. We watched a movie together. I drove them home at 6. I did this every other Saturday for the next 14 months. The lunches with Mark 1 Saturday a month, alone, at my house, without Rebecca, began the first Saturday in January. The first 3 lunches were difficult. The 4th lunch was less difficult. By the sixth lunch in June of 2025, Mark told me, over coffee, that he and Rebecca had been seeing a marriage counselor since February. He told me he had been seeing a therapist of his own since March. He told me he had begun to understand something about his own resentment that he had not been able to see when he was living in my house. I listened. I did not say much in response. I did not, in 14 months, ever tell Mark that I forgave him. I did not tell him because I have not yet, 14 months later, fully forgiven him. I have, however, continued to have lunch with him every month. I have continued to host the grandchildren every other Saturday. I have continued to invite him, slowly, in small, careful increments, back into the version of our family that survived the kitchen vent on the Tuesday night before Thanksgiving. The version that survived is smaller than the version that existed before. It is also, in many ways, more honest. I spent $34,000 of the $300,000 in 2024. I took a small trip to Italy in October with my sister Eleanor. We were there for 12 days. We stayed in a small hotel in Florence and a small hotel on the Amalfi Coast. Eleanor cried at the Sistine Chapel. I cried at the small museum in Rome, where I saw a Caravaggio painting I had loved in a book when I was 20. In November, I bought a new car. The car was a small Subaru with heated seats and good winter tires. I had been driving the same Toyota for 14 years. In December, I donated $5,000 to a local food bank in Frank's name. In January of 2025, I bought a small piece of jewelry for myself, a thin gold bracelet with a single small diamond. I had never owned a piece of jewelry I had bought for myself. I had only worn the pieces Frank had given me. The bracelet cost $1,100. I wear it every day now. I have spent, by my own careful tracking, about $58,000 of the $300,000 across the 14 months since Frank's letter arrived. I plan to spend the rest, slowly, for the rest of my life. When I die, whatever is left will pass into the trust for the grandchildren. What is left will not be very much. That is fine. The grandchildren are getting the house. Frank wanted me to spend the rest on myself. I am doing what Frank wanted. That night I sat in Frank's reading chair in the living room, back in the living room of my own house, finally, after 20 months of small displacement, and I wrote one line in the small notebook that had begun, on the Tuesday night before Thanksgiving, with the 90 seconds of my son's voice. I heard my son ask why I was still alive, so I answered him with paperwork, and I learned, at 73, that the most generous thing my husband ever did for me was the afternoon in May of 2017 when he sat in a lawyer's office and gave Helen a folder with my name on it and asked her to wait until I was ready to use it. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a kitchen vent, above a stove, in a small hallway, in a bathrobe, on the Tuesday night before Thanksgiving, and in the 90 seconds of words that finally let an older woman exhale. I closed the notebook. I poured myself a small glass of wine. It was a Tuesday in January. The house was quiet. The grandchildren had been here on Saturday. The bracelet was on my wrist. Frank had been right. I had enough. I had always had enough. I had simply needed someone to remind me.